The day that changed the world forever. What does it take for one person to change the course of history? What does it mean for someone to lay down their life for the world, knowing the pain, rejection, and suffering they will face? On Good Friday, we are reminded of the ultimate sacrifice, a day when the world witnessed the suffering of Jesus Christ on the cross. But beyond the suffering, Good Friday reveals the deepest truths about love, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. As you reflect on Good Friday, remember this. It is not just a day of sorrow. It is the day that marks the greatest victory of all time. It is a moment in history when heaven and earth collided and everything changed forever. Let's dive deep into the true power of Good Friday and what it means for us today. The cost of redemption is not free. There is always a cost associated with it. On Good Friday, the cost of redemption was paid in full with the life of Jesus Christ. We often talk about redemption as if it's an abstract idea, but the reality is that redemption cost Jesus everything. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus wrestled with the cost of what was to come. The weight of the world's sin pressed down upon him, and he asked, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." Yet, he made the choice to lay down his life. Jesus didn't die because he had no other choice. He chose to die because he loved us. This sacrifice was not just a payment for sins. It was a sacrifice for our freedom, our healing, and our eternal life. When we understand the cost of redemption, we realize that it was not just a historical event. It's personal. Jesus paid for your redemption and mine with his blood, his pain, and his death. We must ask ourselves, how are we living in light of such a high price? How do we honor the sacrifice that was made for us? The cross as the ultimate expression of love. The cross stands as the greatest symbol of love ever displayed in human history. We often think of the cross in terms of suffering and death, but we must not forget that the cross is ultimately an expression of divine love. Jesus' death on the cross was not just a reaction to the sins of humanity. It was an intentional decision driven by love. Jesus knew the price he would pay, yet he went to the cross because he knew it was the only way to bring us back into a relationship with God. In John 15:13, Jesus says, "A greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." When Jesus died on that cross, he was not just laying down his life for his friends. He was laying down his life for the entire world. The message of Good Friday is this: love is sacrificial. Love costs. And the greatest love of all is one that is willing to suffer for the good of others. The power of forgiveness. When Jesus hung on the cross, one of his most powerful statements was, "A Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. Here, in the midst of unimaginable pain and agony, Jesus forgave those who crucified him. His moment on Good Friday challenges our understanding of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not always easy. It's not something that comes naturally. But on the cross, Jesus modeled the ultimate act of forgiveness. He didn't wait for the people to apologize, and he didn't hold grudges. He forgave them not because they deserved it, but because he knew forgiveness would set both him and himself free. In our own lives, we are called to forgive as Jesus forgave. We must ask ourselves, what grudges are we holding? What unforgiveness is binding us? Good Friday is a reminder that forgiveness is powerful, not just for the person who is forgiven, but also for the person who forgives. Victory over sin and death, Good Friday, is a day that marks both sorrow and victory. While Jesus' death on the cross is painful to remember, it is also a declaration of victory. Through his death, Jesus conquered sin and death. Before Jesus' crucifixion, humanity was under the weight of sin, separated from God. Death had the final say. But when Jesus died on the cross, he broke the power of sin and death. He took the penalty for our sin upon himself so that we could live in freedom. The power of the cross is not just in the fact that Jesus died, but in the truth that his death defeated the power of death itself. On Good Friday, we look at the cross not just as a place of suffering, but as a symbol of victory. Jesus defeated the enemy, he overcame sin, and he triumphed over death. That victory is ours to claim. We no longer live in fear of death because Jesus has already conquered it. The silence of God, one of the most profound aspects of Good Friday, is the silence of God. As Jesus hung on the cross, he cried out, my God, my God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Matthew 27:46. In this moment, it felt as if God had turned his back on Jesus. But what we must understand is that this was not an abandonment. It was the fulfillment of God's plan for redemption. In that moment of apparent silence, God was working in a way that was beyond human comprehension. Sometimes in our lives, we face moments when it feels as if God is silent, when it seems as though he is absent. But those moments are often the times when God is working most profoundly behind the scenes. Just as he was working during the silence of Good Friday, he is working in our lives, even when we cannot see it. Good Friday reminds us that God's silence does not mean his absence. In those dark moments, he is present, and he is working all things together for our good, more good. The injustice of the cross on Good Friday, we must confront the reality of injustice. Jesus, the sinless Son of God, was condemned to die as a criminal. He was betrayed by his friend, denied by his followers, and falsely accused by those in power. The trial of Jesus was a miscarriage of justice. But in the face of this injustice, Jesus did not retaliate. He did not seek revenge. Instead, he entrusted himself to God's will. This teaches us a powerful lesson. When we face injustice, we are not called to fight in our own strength. We are called to trust in God's justice. We are called to let go of our need for retribution and to trust that God will make all things right. The injustice of Good Friday calls us to examine our own hearts. When we face unfair treatment, do we respond with bitterness or do we respond with faith, knowing that God will fight for us? The call to follow Jesus Good Friday is not just about remembering what Jesus did for us, it is also a call to action. Jesus calls each of us to follow him. In Matthew 16:24, he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Taking up our cross is not about seeking suffering. It is about living a life of self-denial and surrender. It is about living for something greater than ourselves, just as Jesus did. Good Friday calls us to a deeper commitment to follow Jesus, no matter the cost. Jesus, no matter the cost. As we reflect on the cross, we must ask ourselves, am I truly following Jesus? Am I willing to take up my cross and live the life he calls me to? Good Friday is not just a day to reflect, it is a day to commit. The hope of the resurrection, finally. Good Friday points us to the hope of the resurrection. While we mourn Jesus' death, we also look forward to the resurrection on Easter Sunday. The resurrection of Jesus is the ultimate proof that death does not have the final word. Jesus' death on the cross was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The resurrection gives us the hope of eternal life, the assurance that no matter what we face in this life, we have victory in the life to come. The resurrection reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. Good Friday is a day of mourning, but it is also a day of anticipation. It is a day to reflect on the sacrifice of Jesus, but it is also a day to look forward to the new life that he offers.